Hey, hi everybody. It is Garnet, Monday morning, August 17, 2026, and yep, I'm here in Chiang Mai, Thailand. In the last video, I sort of ended with a little bit of a teaser. I said that I would do my best to explain some of the deeper elements surrounding brainwaves. You may recall that this kind of series is called Are Brainwaves Real? Maybe just a catchy name, but it is like curious, oh, and confusing and concerning. Okay, so um, I'll start off with sort of a contextual caveat, something that we should probably reflect on, that when we talk about brain waves, we typically talk about things like alpha and gamma, and we give them numbers like alpha is 8 and to 12, and gamma is 30 and above, and so on and so on and so on. And I think it's really consequential, it's quite important to appreciate, and I'll describe it in my simplified terms, that the 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 number we get, the concept like 15 hertz. Remember, if you saw the previous videos, the map is not the territory. So when we see something like 15 hertz, we think that that's 15 hertz is coming out of the brain and we're measuring it, when actually it is a kind of purified or filtered or scrubbed mathematical impression. It's a representation where the algorithm senses certain activity that starts to behave with some periodicity, meaning regularity, but it is not perfectly regular. It is for fractions of a second or maybe a few seconds at most. And the algorithm detects that as evidence, mathematically transforms it, that's the Fast Fourier Transform, into a nice, neat, clean representation of something that is really quite complex. So that we have to, I believe, accept as fundamentally true, if I've explained it correctly. Okay, so you put EEG on somebody's head and you have them attempt a certain mental action or state. 15 hertz, for example, may come out more or less when a person is, say, attempting to focus or think clearly or something like that. There is, and this is an important word, an association. It is a big risk, if not wrong, to think of it as cause and effect. When I focus in this deliberate cognition, this thinking, that makes 15 hertz come out. Now, remember, the 15 hertz itself is an associative representation. So even the fact that we call it 15 hertz, we have to accept that that's a translation of something that is not so neat and clean, but we want it neat and clean. So, okay, when I do that, the EEG reports or expresses that activity. Okay, this is where we enter what's called the reverse inference fallacy. Fallacy meaning it's not true or correct. First of all, that we have inferred to begin with that a focused, concentrated cognition has a relationship to 15 hertz, the scrubbed mathematical model, the map, but we're not sure. We can't say for sure We don't know cause and effect, chicken or egg. It's just an association. So what do we do when we reverse that inference? That's why it's called reverse inference fallacy. Inference is when you put meaning into information that may or may not be there. You infer, different than imply. Imply is when the information has some kind of hidden or secondary quality. Well, infer. So we inferred that a focused, concentrated activity was associated with 15 hertz, a mathematically scrubbed number. What happens if we do that in reverse? Meaning, hey, if I generate a mathematically scrubbed pure 15 hertz signal and introduce that into the brain, then that is going to result in that focused cognitive activity that we first used in the other EEG. That's a fallacy. You can't infer that. It's called a reversed inference, and we do it surprisingly all the time. So there are two elements in there. One is to understand that the EEG algorithmically is seeking evidence of a certain range, and it detects something, and then it's called Gaussian, where it'll take this thing that has a mix of aperiodic with periodic, mountain, valley, valley, mountain, mountain, valley, and it says, you know, I'm going to kind of create a nice curved, a Gaussian averaging of this, and I'm going to call that 15 hertz. It's not a lie, it's just it's dramatically incomplete of what is actually happening in the brain. Okay, I'm not saying that's good or bad, it's just as far as I know, that's the way it is. Okay, the second one. The first one, reverse inference fallacy. Second one has a relationship. It's called inverse Fast Fourier Transform, the FFT, the transfer. I'll just call it the transformation thing. So first of all, what is the transformation thing? Fourier was a person. He calculated how to create very clear waveform frequencies from quite complex information. Now we can do it with certain computerized algorithms. So now it's the Fast Fourier Transform. Let's go all the way back where the EEG and the person is, I don't know, you know, they're meditating or something, whatever it is, whatever the task, they're doing a mathematical problem. There's a big range. And we wonder, well, what's going on with the brainwave activity when they do that? And that's where information is like a volcano coming out, electrochemical activity coming out. We can detect it and measure it. So the algorithm goes looking in this big noisy mess. It used to be called noise. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And it says, hey, what's there? What's there? Sniffing around. Oh, wait a minute. That looks like something in the range of what we call alpha, like 8 to 12 hertz. There's in there. And now let me see. And it takes this jaggedy complex kind of something moving in a certain way and transforms that mathematically. That's the transform, the Fast Fourier Transform. It transforms that into a purified, kind of scrubbed mathematical expression. The map is not the territory. That expression is the frequency. So we do that algorithmically, you know, like a computing process, so that the raw information is transformed into a very clean, usually whole integer, not any decimal points unless you want to squeeze it a bit to 1 or maybe 2. And then we get our brainwave report. Okay, so if you understand that there's an algorithmic transformation from complexity into regularity in a clean scrub period vibration called a frequency. Inverse frequency, inverse transform fallacy. Okay, it relates to the first thing, but it's a different perspective. If I introduce into the brain a sustained frequency for seconds or minutes or a long time, there is this assumption that there is in the brain some kind of transformation process. There would be a kind of innate FFT in there that takes this scrubbed, I'll say artificial, it might even be unnatural. These are just words. But this signal, which never occurs in the brain for more than a few milliseconds, is coming and coming and coming, and that our brain has inside an FFT that will transform that back. It's an inverse transformation from simplicity to complexity. That's the inverse transform fallacy. So, I think these things have very big meanings. Certainly in the work that I'm involved in with the neurovisor, why I have a concept of brain engagement, not brain entrainment. Brain entrainment is a subset. Brain entrainment, you have to really look at the definition. Brain entrainment is not false. It's, in my opinion, just radically incomplete and easily misinterpreted or misunderstood. Okay, so this is a bit more of a technical short video. It's Monday morning, what the hell? So it's possible to measure what's going on in the brain when signals are coming in with sustained regularity, these scrubbed map-like signals. And frankly, many times it doesn't show anything good. Maybe not this video, but I'll talk about a meta-study that was done a couple of years ago of a big bunch of entrainment research studies and what the outcome was. It was weak in terms of entrainment, I'll say, at least. So when the signal is being introduced and sustained for very long periods of time in the neurological world, which exists in milliseconds, maybe seconds, when it's coming in, there can be a report in the EEG that the brain neurons are, in some areas, are firing at that rate. Now, it's usually called entrainment. Is it really entrainment? Meaning, is it a neurological response to the signal? Or is it simply a neurological reaction to being prodded at that? Well, one thing that we know for sure is that in most every case, as soon as the signal stops, the brain firing also stops almost instantly, like within a few milliseconds. It's called in the period of the stimulation. So when it stops, the brain doesn't continue doing that. The brain also stops firing. So again, was that a response, like a learning response, or was that simply like an irritation reaction? So what really is brain entrainment itself, regardless of all these other fallacies that I'm talking about, what is really happening there? And is it that there is really an induced state? Is it the reverse inference fallacy stumbling around? You can see that there are 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe more of these kind of neurologically controversial observations. Okay, so Are Brainwaves Real It depends on how you define brainwave and real. And you can see it's not at least what I think I see is it's not a very simple 1 + 1 = 2, cause and effect. There are a lot of questions that surround this. Now, in an earlier video, I mentioned that, this saying that everything is a frequency. And I said, well, all frequencies are vibrations, but not all vibrations are frequencies. If the definition of frequency is a highly regular, periodic, repeated signal, kind of like a radio transmission frequency, which is man-made. So I'd also mentioned that the fact, I won't say the truth, but the fact is when measuring our brain activity, the majority of the activity was given this, loaded term noise. Like, it's a bunch of noise. I'm looking for those regular peaky things. So all this noise is in the way. Well, the noise takes up generally, and this is a number not mine, I mean, from qualified research, it takes up 70 to 90% of all the activity in the brain. These aperiodic, right? Periodic means regular, A means not regular. It is vibrating or oscillating, but it is not necessarily at all a regular oscillation that I would call a frequency. I mean, that is the definition. So it can be up to 90%. In certain cases, it can be almost 100%, meaning the leftover percent appears, remember the scrubbing in the Fourier transform, appears to be more periodic instead of more aperiodic. Well, it was only 6 years ago, 2020, a couple of guys, I forget their names, but they came up with another algorithmic style. Because remember, we use an interpreter called algorithms. And it's called FOOF or FOOF, F-O-O-O-F, 3 O's, F-O-O-F. It's got a new name, spectrogram or something. I'm sorry. But the F-O-O-O, FOOF is kind of I don't know, I like it. It's a silly name. What does it mean? Because it's an acronym. Filling oscillations and 1/F or 1/frequency. It tries to describe the fundamental design of this algorithm and what it does, and there are different ways of adjusting it. It's an open source Python code. It says, okay, let's recognize, instead of discarding 70, 80, 90, 100%, 90% of all this activity, let's recognize it and have it kind of separated from the periodic. And that's what the algorithm does. And it's like, oh, guess what? This noisy, quote unquote, this complex, it's not random. I would say it's highly complex. Maybe it seems chaotic, but I'm sure there's some kind of regulatory wisdom in there. That this activity that in an earlier video, I called of the ocean analogy, the currents and tides and thermal layers of the ocean. This has a very bold relationship to consciousness states and degrees of awareness, whether it's more or less, whether it's sloping, and it has a profound effect on what appears to be the waves on the ocean, what appears to be the frequencies. So earlier algorithms basically did their best to totally ignore this because it got in the way and would come in with the self-fulfilling prophecy that you're going to find what you're looking for. So it's let's go looking for this frequency band, or let's go looking for this frequency band, and we will ignore anything that is not in that frequency band. And you will even kind of like mathematically scrub this so it appears neat and clean. So there is so much that we're learning in advancing neuroscience, and yet there is a tremendous amount of older, certainly simplified, in some cases, probably erroneous theory that we're dragging along. And all of this, along with other things that I'll talk about sooner or later, predictive brain coding, the surprise of, oh, I want more of that dopamine, Carhart-Harris and the entropic brain and the effect of psychedelics and all these things. My sincere attempt with the Neurovisor approach has been to take all of this into account and use frequency stimulations, but not frequencies per se. I'm more interested in the relationship between frequencies. What happens when you do this with this, following a neuroplastic model, admittedly based on predictive brain coding in great part. Carl Friston, one of the brainiacs of our time, has sort of massaged the predictive brain coding model into what he calls the free energy model. I'll talk about that to the best of my ability. That the Neurovisor brain engagement process involves frequency, but it's not frequency centric. It's not saying, here is a frequency and all the things we talked about, the different fallacies and foof and so on, that it works with frequencies, generally speaking, in terms of their dynamic relationships. In that sense, there is a strong comparison to notes in music. What makes music music is not any one particular note, unless it's a one-note samba. But music has this dynamic and complex relationship with pitches, with notes, which are audio frequencies, and they conform something where it is not 1 + 1 = 2. It is 1 + 1 = 3, and I will talk about that in the future. So this is a little bit science-y. It's my Monday morning energy, I guess. It's been on my mind overnight since yesterday. So you can reflect on this. You can search it up. I haven't made it up. I've made up some analogies, but I'm doing my best to be veritable, truthful, that you can look at how do we identify what is a frequency. That map is not the territory concept, that what we're getting is a scrubbed or purified mathematical representation. The other is that we have to be careful to not be too liberal with assigning meaning in things that are associating and not making it cause and effect. The saying, correlation is not causation. And then we have these fallacies where we can make an assumption, an inference, and think that we can reverse that and have an effect. And also that the brain has kind of embedded in it some innate transformation process. So it can figure out what these rather mathematically abstracted signals mean to the actual activity of the brain. And foof it. Let's make sure that we appreciate that a great deal, a majority of the brain's activity are not frequencies. They are aperiodic oscillations or vibrations. Sorry, that's just the way the brain is made. Thanks much. I will see you, I don't know, pretty soon or not soon, or I'll see you again. Bye-bye. Thank you.